Hey everyone, this is Taylor, and today we are re-releasing our episode on the Toolbox Killers. It's the classic "don't get into someone's car," and also don't blame the victim because I would definitely help someone if they needed help. I can't remember if this is like a Ted Bundy situation, but I don't know. I kind of would help someone and definitely get killed, like in the Silence of the Lambs. And but I think this is just generally don't hitchhike. I think we're past that as a people, as a culture. I think we did that in like the 1970s when cars were first like taking us across the country and we were really excited about it, and then we could like leave and all this freedom and you didn't have a phone, but now have someone tracking your location at all times and don't hitchhike. That's my best advice. Hope you enjoy, and I will see you on the next one. As a reminder, we are re-releasing all of our episodes, so you can also listen to them in full if you go back, but I'm just dividing them in half for you all. So that's where we are right now. Enjoy. Thank you.
In the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA096.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Very fun.
So I'm going to segue into the true crime side of the equation for today. Like I said, my drink today is water. It has absolutely nothing to do with the story. It has to do with the fact that I was at a work conference all last week in Florida, and I just need to spend this weekend and the next week hydrating.
That's fair.
So that's the idea. So this whole time we've been looking at relationships that were doomed to fail, and knowingly or not, I've kind of couched that, and actually you kind of have too, Taylor, within the framework of romantic relationships.
Mm-hmm.
But there are probably thousands of stories of friendships that were also doomed to fail. Friendships that probably should have been avoided all along. It's funny, as we discuss the premise of the show and how sometimes the universe puts two people together at the exact same time. And then I started researching this particular episode and framed it more as being put together at the exact wrong time. Like a pairing that you should have the universe could have avoided and done without.
Yeah. Ooh, okay.
Yeah, I know. I'm getting again, like the premise is like a little bit shifty, but it's still kind of like, you really should have put these two together.
Like you said at the beginning, we have it's a very loose premise.
Exactly.
We're just telling stories.
We're easy going over here.
Thanks for coming. Okay.
Yeah. So one thing that I thought of when I was looking into like this thing that I'm going to talk about today was it seems that in non-romantic relationships in particular that end in tragedy, there's at the very least either a power imbalance between the parties or a feedback loop that leads to the tragedy. And a lot of times, a power imbalance with these kinds of friendships are based on one's mental acuity versus the others. As in, I can't remember I should have done the research on this before I started talking. What's the book where the guy hugs the bunny too hard and then the friend?
Oh yeah. It's not Grapes of Wrath. Is it Grapes of Wrath?
No. It's
bunny hug
of Mice and Men.
hug.
Of Mice and Men. Like there's a great example of, two individuals with slightly different mental acuity, and it was obviously due to fail. So like that's what I started thinking about. And when I started going through the research of this, I thought about probably the single most impactful friendship gone wrong from our childhood, Taylor, in real life, not of Mice and Men, but in real life. Can you think of what I'm thinking about? The most impactful one of our generation?
The most impactful friendship of our generation?
Gone wrong.
Gone wrong? Oh my God, I have no idea. Can you give me a hint?
Colorado.
Oh, are you gonna do Columbine?
I'm not doing Columbine, but that's the story that came to mind. So yeah, that's exactly what I thought of when I was thinking about like, man, two people should definitely not have gotten together in any capacity. I thought of Columbine. And yeah, okay, so for those that don't know, Columbine is about Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. There were two friends who became acquaintances in high school. And in 1999, they ended up injuring 24 people and killing 13, including later themselves. So total death count was 15. And this is kind of the situation that kicked off mass school shootings in general.
I remember I'm sorry to interrupt, but
No.
I was in Reno at like a student council conference, and it was like 500 like good kids,
Yeah.
talking about how we get everybody to be involved and whatever. And we had just had like 3 days of like, meeting new people and doing all these things. And I remember getting on the bus to go back to Las Vegas to home and someone telling us that it had happened. And it was just like such a stark contrast to what I had just experienced of like this, like, all the kids trying to like, get everybody involved and excited. And then, at the same time, someone was killing people in a school where you are supposed to feel safe, but you don't anymore, obviously. Thank you. Fuck you, America.
So that's actually why I thought it was like I couched it as the most impactful because there's certain
Hmm.
things that happen in our youth where you're like, I remember where I was. It's like when people talk
Yeah.
about where they were when Kennedy was shot. Anyways, but that was kind of my first thought, and it took me back to a particularly awful story I remember reading about like years ago, and I think is still considered obscure in the pantheon of true crime. Like I don't hear this story told very often. It is
Hmm.
well, let's get into it. Maybe you
Okay.
already know it.
I'm
I'm
nervous.
I'm thinking about the Toolbox killers, Lawrence Bittaker and
Oh,
Roy Norris.
gross. Yes. I know a little bit. I feel like I know enough that kind of makes me want to throw up. So I'm excited.
Okay, so yeah, again, you're a PhD in true crime, so I'm not surprised. I do want to differentiate this from the toy box killer, which sounds delightful by comparison. Like you're forced to be locked in an FAO Schwartz before they kill you. This is not that. This is Toolbox. So,
That's not a thing, though.
what with the FAO Schwartz? Why? Because they're bankrupt?
I'm just saying that'd be a weird way to, a weird thing to
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
Because,
That might have to be the reboot of those Saw movies.
oh my
Um,
God.
like I said, like I almost feel like there are some true crime stories that though they're incredibly interesting and compelling are just too much for mainstream consumption and public
Yeah.
appeal. Uh,
Hmm.
that's essentially this. The Toolbox Killers, like I'm not going to go super into the weeds and details on the gross stuff
Hmm.
because it's just too gross.
Yep.
So noting that at the top.
Totally. And don't, yeah. I mean, I feel like I know some of the gross stuff. I'm sure that you'll talk about some of it as well, but it's gross.
I will go mildly into the.
It's like real bad. Okay.
It's real real bad. Like I was thinking about like how certain situations have like and certain folks within this genre have an it factor. You know, Bundy being considered normal and good looking, Gacy being a
Hmm.
clown involved in politics, BTK had a normal family. These two are just garbage humans. Like,
Hmm.
they have none of that. If you look at a picture of Lawrence Bittaker in particular, he looks
Look it
like
up.
Pennywise the clown. It's terrifying. Like he's
I'm gonna look it up in an incognito window so it's not like in my search history.
that's a good call. I should have been doing that this whole time.
Oof, yeah.
You see it like his
He does
forehead,
look like Pennywise.
right? His like
I see what you're
chin's
talking
really
about.
like pointy and it's got a huge forehead. Like it's just creepy looking dude.
Yeah.
Let's get into our two main characters and note the red flags along the way. I'll start with what I'm going to say is the main antagonist of the story, which is Lawrence Bittaker. He actually died fairly recently. He actually died in 2019. So we'll get to how that ended up happening. But Lawrence was born in 1940 to a couple who gave him up to an orphanage. He was adopted as an infant, and his family moved around quite a bit. I don't have the years, but I do know over the course of 17 years, he went from Pennsylvania to Florida to Ohio to California. So setting up roots was obviously a challenge. Like if you're a kid
Yeah.
growing up like that, that's you're gonna have like very shallow human connections because you'll never have the opportunity to build deeper ones, right?
Or I mean, it also depends on who you are. Like my husband, his dad was in the military and he moved around and like he has friends from every place that he lived that he still talks to because his parents were making friends with everybody. And his parents were like made it a mission for them to meet people.
Yeah. If you as a parent understand that you have to make that like a point that your kids are socialized, then I'm sure it's different than if you're this guy.
It doesn't sound like he got this, so
Right.
continue.
Once he turned 17, he seemed like he kind of fell into a life of crime, but they were still kind of cute 1950s crimes. Like he was arrested for auto theft, evading arrest, And I mean, this last one is less Dennis the Menace. There was a hit and run as well.
Oh, that's bad.
Yeah, that's we don't know if the person died or not, but still. I mean, he got hit by a 1950s car. He probably wasn't doing great. He spent 2 years in a reform school, and he kind of just drifted in and out of different facilities for various different crimes until he was about 21 years old. At 21, Lawrence's mental acuity comes into play. He is said to be manipulative and was found to have an IQ of 138. Do you know what that means, Taylor?
I don't know what that means.
Yeah, I didn't know what it meant either, for the record.
Okay. It's like my
So
blood pressure. Like, I don't know what that means. You just say numbers at me.
systolic, diabolic. It's like, yeah, just am I gonna die or not? For context, the IQ classifications, there's like various versions of this, but like just generally speaking, 90 to 109 on an IQ test is average.
Okay.
120 to 129 is considered superior. 130 and above is considered very superior. So, like I said, there's different scoring methodologies for this, but just generally speaking, a quote unquote genius is someone with an IQ of around 140 or so.
Is that true? Like, what if you're a bad test taker? Or what if you're a good test taker? Or
Yeah,
how do they test you?
I don't know how test taking or your ability to be good at I've never taken an IQ test. I don't know if it's like if do you need to know something, or is it just like how you logically reach conclusions to things?
Right.
Because it's I don't think they ask you like who was president in 1912. I think they
Right.
just
It's not like a Kaplan course to study for it.
right.
How
I
do
think
you
it's
I'm sorry, I'm
no. I
just
want
kind
to
of
know.
how do you take an IQ test?
They're like this
Just
is
test that IQ, Mensa, the most accurate IQ test. Ooh, is one you can do in 5 minutes. Who knows? There's a
I feel
free
like
IQtest.net.
yeah. I feel like you need to go into a space with people in like lab coats watching you do it for it to be like legit.
So Einstein was 160.
Yeah. So I was gonna bring that up. So, for example, again, a genius is somebody with an IQ of around 140 or above. Lawrence was a 138. I looked it up. Elon Musk was a 155, and like you said, Einstein was a 160.
Ugh.
He was closer to Elon Musk than he was to our IQ. For context, I'm a
Snoop Dogg is 147. Um,
seriously.
yeah, but I don't believe that about
Okay.
Elon Musk. I think he made that up.
I mean, I don't know if he. Yeah,
I
I
want to see
don't
some
know.
receipts for Elon Musk's
I mean, the guy
near Einstein IQ.
started 3 companies and ran
I mean,
them,
kind of. I
and
think
then
it's
and
just
then spun off the planet with his
I think
ego.
it's just like not having any empathy. Anyway, continue. I'm so sorry.
No,
Anyway, let's take IQ tests later. We'll let everybody know
yeah,
unless they're bad or
yeah.
wildly different.
And
If
then
one of
nobody
us
will
is really smart and one of us is not, let's just not share it.
exactly,
Okay.
exactly. It's got to be the same.
We will not be sharing our IQs later.
I think if I had to guess, you're probably a 119, which is just shy of superior. It's very average. And I think I'm probably right next to that. Maybe like a 117, 116.
All right, we'll take it.
We'll figure it out
Okay.
and report back, maybe. So I bring all this up because I mentioned that I think he's the main antagonist, and I think being basically a professional criminal with that level of intelligence has to put you in a rare category based on the people you would normally interact with. Let's leave Lawrence there and move on to his partner in crime, Roy Norris. So Roy was 8 years Lawrence's junior. So there you go. There's a little bit of that obvious power imbalance. In addition to the
Mm-hmm.
fact that Lawrence was crazy smart and Roy wasn't. There was also the
Mm-hmm.
age gap. He ended up in foster homes quite a bit, mostly due to his mom being a drug addict.
Mm.
This guy was kind of fucked from birth, it sounds like. There was a lot of
Yeah.
stories around his abuse and what people did to him. And he didn't have an easy life growing up. But again, like also, I was reading it and I was also thinking, like, it's the 50s. Like, how do you interpret that? Like, isn't
Mm-hmm.
this standard that your dad comes home and just beats the entire family? Like, I don't.
Right.
I mean, I'm not saying it's good, but I'm saying like, did he have it worse than a lot of people, or was his particularly bad? Hard to gauge that. I think.
Yeah,
I w-
totally.
One thing that was interesting was that at one point in his youth, Roy did try to attempt suicide.
Oh.
Yeah, like he just strikes me as someone like a kid with no mentors or anyone to look up to. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I don't really see him as like an obvious deviant just yet. Like mostly just like a lost kid.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I would say that changed the older he got. Uh, he, unlike Lawrence, who was like involved in stupid petty theft, like stealing cars and shit, Roy's dabbling in the criminal underworld came about through sexual crimes that he was committing or trying to commit. So
Mhm.
around the age of 21, he was caught trying to break into a woman's house for refusing to let him in. It sounded kind of like a date gone wrong. For that, he was arrested. He was diagnosed as having a schizoid personality disorder. Again, not to harp on this too much, but think about that. On the one hand, you have Lawrence, who is basically Beethoven levels of intelligence. Beethoven, I looked it up,
Mhm.
was 135 to 140. And on the other
Okay.
hand, you have an obviously mentally ill man in Roy who's diagnosed as a schizoid personality, right?
Yeah, totally.
After Roy's release, he attacks a female student in San Diego, strikes her in the head, and then beats her repeatedly. So his escalation is ramping pretty quickly from trying to break into a woman's house to like this level of aggression and violence.
Mhm.
Still, when he's arrested, he goes to the psych ward for mental illness, which I don't know how I feel about this. I don't know how mental illness or the criminal justice system worked in the 1950s and 60s, but this guy's crimes veered so heavily towards sexual violence, and they keep putting him in psych wards.
Yeah. I
Like,
don't
is that a mental illness?
Yes, probably in some way, but also is very violent, so you should probably shouldn't be around other people,
Eh,
right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
I don't know.
I was thinking, well, it's definitely abhorrent behavior, so maybe that's a signal of mental illness. But yeah, definitely put him in jail. He shouldn't be around others, right?
Yeah. Definitely shouldn't be around other people.
Staying on brand for Roy, he is eventually released from that situation, and then he rapes a woman in Redondo Beach, which is
Mm.
actually reported to police. And that'll come up again because that is a really, really critical moment in why everything else here happens that happens. I will say this, like, I am changing, I'm not using the word rape very much deliberately in this because I just don't want to say it like
Mhm.
300 times. So just note that I don't know, I don't get triggered by much, but I did get kind of upset at like how many times this comes up over and over again. And so I
Yeah.
just don't want to do that to you or the listeners or myself again. So I'm just not going to go into detail.
We can
Fair?
assume there was a lot of sexual crime
Yeah, exactly.
happening. Okay.
Exactly. So let's get into the overlap between these two deviants. So how did they come together? So let's going back to Lawrence. In 1974, Lawrence stole a steak. Again, he's kind of Dennis the Menace. Like what a stupid crime. Anyways, so the grocery store employee who was going way above and beyond confronted Lawrence, and Lawrence ended up stabbing the guy.
Oh God,
Yeah,
never do that. Let him take it.
take the steak. Like who cares?
Just who cares? Yeah.
The guy lived, but Lawrence was arrested, obviously, and he was sent to a prison in San Luis Obispo. All these places that I'm listing, I'm like, I have so many amazing memories of, and it's so
I know.
weird
Like it's so
couching
beautiful
that.
there.
Redondo Beach is one of my favorite places in the world, and it's just like you think about what was going on with these guys, and it just it tints everything in this weird
Mm-hmm.
shade.
Mm-hmm.
And then going back to Roy's rape accusation in Redondo Beach in 1976, he was arrested for that. And then he also landed in San Luis Obispo. So now you have the
Mm-hmm.
two coming together, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have the incredibly smart, manipulative Lawrence, the incredibly, mentally ill and sexually violent Roy coming together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was thinking about this. I was like, how do you compare this? Like, what is it like with that kind of kismet when two people kind of come together? I thought about like Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, or Jobs and Wozniak. Like that's kind of what this is in like a
Yeah, like,
totally
hey,
opposite way.
think we're gonna change the world. Let's make it worse.
Yeah,
Or let's invent computers or let's be the best. And yeah, totally.
yeah. So the two hung out in like seemingly different crowds. Roy was more with like the hardened criminal types, the biker types, and Lawrence kind of kept to himself and hung out with the older inmates. Not for any, like, it just seems like that's just where he gravitated towards. It wasn't because like he couldn't hang out. Apparently
Mm-hmm.
Lawrence would save Roy multiple times from getting beaten up and jumped. Like he wasn't like soft in any way. Like he just didn't hang out with that crowd. Regardless, they bonded while they were in prison, mostly because of this situation where Lawrence was saving Royce from getting his ass kicked. They bonded and decided to get together once they were released. And what they bonded over, again, it was just gross sexual stuff that don't need to talk about.
Yeah.
But that was basically it. That's like
Great.
they just like were like sharing fantasies with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Lawrence ends up getting released in 1978, and then he moves to Los Angeles. And again, given what I said about the guy earlier, like he's doing pretty well for himself. He got like a really, really good job. He was making $1,000 a week in 1978, which
Yeah.
I can't do the conversion, but that sounds like $1 billion in today's money.
I think you're right. I think it's $1 billion.
It's exactly $1 billion. Are you doing the conversion?
Yeah, it's 1978
Yeah.
dollars in 1978 money to today. Oh my God, $4,500.
A week?
Yeah, that's
That's
a lot.
so much money. Yeah, he's crushing it.
Yeah, shit.
Yeah, he was a skilled laborer. He socialized normally, like people knew him. So I didn't write any of this in the outline, but he would like donate to the Salvation Army. He would go buy food and give it out to the homeless people in downtown LA. Like he was being a normal dude, despite the fact that he looks like Pennywise. Roy's released a few months after this, and he goes right back to being a piece of shit, committing more sexual assaults while living with his mother. For whatever reason, Lawrence writes to Roy, and the two make plans to meet up. And they did. And this is where they start putting together their plan to play out the scenarios they discussed while they were in jail together.
Oof.
They acted like this was like a startup. Like they started like pooling their money together. Like it was. That's why I brought up like the Wozniak jobs things. I was just like, they had this like light bulb moment, but it was just like so counter good. Like I don't. Yeah, they pulled money together. They were like buying materials. I'll get into this. Like they like.
Right, they're like planning to do something like a party, like something fun, but they're planning to commit crimes.
They ended up converting a van. Like they did the van life thing before van life was a thing.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was. Anyways, we'll go into it. They ended up buying a van, obviously, and I started wondering, like, is this where the trope comes from? Like, did these guys actually invent that trope?
Did they invent the van?
Yeah. I don't know, but it had to have been close to the beginning of that, right? I mean, how long have vans even been around?
Totally. That's funny.
So yeah, let's get into what they ended up doing after they put together this, LLC of theirs. I'm joking, there was no LLC, obviously. So they have their van.
They're probably on the road to that.
Yeah, exactly. So they have their van, they have a plan, and they have each other's support. They start going through with this plan. This all gets, like I said, super gratuitous, and I just don't want to say the word rape 300 times. So I'm going to gloss over a lot, except one particular murder I will go into the details of. Well, part of the details of. I'm actually not going to go into details of that one either that much. But the overarching premise was the same. They'd see a girl walking on the beach. Like it's just the most like innocent,
safe place.
How many times? I mean, how many times have you go to Manhattan Beach, you go to Redondo, like it's just beautiful, and everybody's just having a good time in the sun. It's like the safest place you would hope to be. And anyways, that's what they would do. They'd see a girl walking, always near the beach or on the beach, approach her, tell her they have marijuana or beer, and then they can give her a ride. They abduct her, and they typically drive her up to the San Gabriel Mountains where they do what they do and kill her there. That's it. That's their entire MO.
Do they always kill them?
No, they didn't. So there was several women or girls who would either get away or they would release for whatever reason. Yeah, it was a little bit. It seems like just something got into them with the ones that they ended up killing, but none of them had good experiences. Like none of them were like they got away like not emotionally scarred. So.
Of course, no, no, of course.
Yeah, we'll get into one of those women actually later because she becomes really, really relevant. So the list that I'm going to go off of the ones that we know they killed. There's actually one more that they think they killed because there was pictures of her alive in the San Gabriel Mountains, but these guys never talked about that one, so they don't know what happened to her. So she's just always been missing. The first one was 16-year-old Lynn Schaefer. The second one was 18-year-old Andrea Joy Hall. The third and fourth were Jackie Doris Gilliam, who was 15, and Jacqueline Leah Lamp, who was 13. They spent 2 days torturing those two girls. I didn't mention this, but the reason they were called the Toolbox Killers is because the back of the van, like I mentioned, like I said, I was going to talk about later, was converted into like a workshop that also had a bed in it. And part of the torture method came from devices they kept in the toolbox. And
Ugh.
like that comes up big time with Jackie and Jacqueline. And it will come up again with the next one. The next one was Shirley Lynette Ledford, who was 16 when she was abducted while hitchhiking home from a Halloween party. Again, the hitchhiking thing, the van, it's just like so, it's like a
I mean, like,
movie.
now, hopefully, we know a little bit better,
Yeah.
but I feel like then this is the story we hear 1,000 times. Like, a woman was hitchhiking, got into a van, and gets murdered. It happened, it seems like it happened all the time. And maybe it happened 1% of the time, but
Yeah.
people were doing it all the time, which is really crazy. I to think about that was like, oh, I'll just hitchhike home. What?
Yeah, from a Halloween party. When I was living in Hill Country, I would constantly see hitchhikers for whatever reason, and there was a part of me, Taylor, that was like, just stop, like
I
get the
know.
story, like just figure out what is going on, like get the story of what's happening.
And you can get murdered on both sides, picking someone
Yeah,
up and being picked up.
I would be murdered.
Ugh.
I'm definitely on that side of that equation. Shirley is the one that I'll actually talk about because it's, I mean, they're all bad, but it's the worst one. For context, the audio recording of what happened to her is now used by the FBI to desensitize agents.
Oh,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. We're going to be harping a lot on that audio recording. It is really, really bad.
Did you listen to it?
You can't listen to it. You can't find it, but there's
Oh,
transcripts
good.
of it that are circulating, and there's also like up to 1,000 reports of people who actually have listened to it and what the outcomes of them listening to it was. Which again, like that audio recording is going to keep coming up over and over again because
Okay.
it sounds like very, very dramatic impacts on everybody who listened to it.
Wow.
So
Oof.
um the so like I said, like if you wanted to, you can look up, like you can't look up the audio recording, but you can look up the transcript of it. I'll expand on one part of what was happening during the recording that sounds horrible. I think I know what the answer to this is, Taylor. You might actually know what this is because you sort of are familiar with this crime. Do you know what an old cranon is? It's part
Is
of your
it?
anatomy.
Oh, no.
Okay. So it's part of your elbow. So it's this part. I'm pointing, nobody can see this because it's audio medium,
I
but
mean,
like,
it's an elbow. Point your elbow.
well,
Everybody put your elbows in the air.
yeah, so
Point to it.
it is the bottom part. It's the part that like is hinged from the forearm that
Hmm.
ties to the top, right? So obviously it's a place where a lot of bone comes together, a lot of cartilage comes together.
Is it your
There's
funny bone?
No, your funny bone's above that. Your funny,
Okay.
actually, your funny bone, the top part of your your funny bone is where the top part of your old cranium actually connects to the upper arm.
Okay. I don't know why
Yeah.
this makes me want to throw up, but just like talking about it is making me kind of nauseous, but keep going.
Aren't you glad we're doing this at 8 a.m. your time? Shirley's autopsy revealed that that part of her anatomy was basically sawdust.
Oh my God.
So in the audio recording, the sound of a sledgehammer repeatedly hitting something can be heard. There were 25 distinct sounds of that happening with a ton of screaming and everything else that came with it. And the assumption is that that's where that injury came from. It was one of a lot of injuries, but that's the bulk of what you would hear if you ever were able to hear the audio recording is the sounds. Oh God, it's like, I'm like thinking about it. It's like
Okay.
so awful.
Pause. They recorded it and
Yeah, they
kept it?
recorded it and kept it.
Just the audio or the recorded video?
No, I mean this is 78. There's probably no capacity for video recording in a van, right? So no, it was just
Oh,
audio.
they're in the van.
Yeah.
It seems hard to wield a sledgehammer in a van. Keep
I
going.
mean, they really, I mean, it's why
You have to really want it.
you
Yeah.
don't get in vans.
Don't get in vans. Yeah, totally 100%.
Yeah, that detail is the only one that I really am gonna discuss because it just shows how terrible and brutal it was. Later on, Roy himself would describe the tape by saying, "If you ever heard that tape, there's just no possible way that you'd not begin crying and trembling. I doubt you could listen to more than 60 seconds of it." But
Oh my
he's sa-
God.
but he's
But he
saying
was
it
there.
but he's saying it like he's proud of it.
Oh my God.
Yeah, like like it wasn't like a oh man, can you believe how crazy this was? Like what a wild Friday that was. Like no, he's kind of like he's bragging about it.
Yeah.
So
Yikes.
one interesting note that might have contributed to why her death was particularly awful is that Lawrence, she was rejected by Lawrence. So she worked at some diner that Lawrence would frequent, and he asked her out, and she said no. And
Oh no.
they actually think that's also why she ended up getting in the van because she was like, "Oh, I know this guy. I see him all the time."
Right.
So there was like a trust element there, but she didn't know that he felt the way he felt towards her. Like what he want, what his intention was, obviously.
Yeah, she didn't expect to get murdered.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
should be able to say no to people and not fear for your
murder.
safety.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So after Shirley's death and her body was discovered, she was the only one whose body was discovered. By the way, everybody else
Ugh.
was like lost in the mountains. Roy, he's a real social butterfly. He rekindled a friendship with another guy he met in jail named Joseph Jackson. And Joseph seemed to have way more humanity in him than Roy himself. Roy went on to tell Joseph what he and Lawrence had been up to. Just
Uh-huh.
like, what are
Just like
you?
casually mentioning it, like, oh, what did you do this weekend?
It's just. Have you ever been cornered by someone who thinks what they're telling you is amazing and you can't get away from them?
Sure.
I'll tell you what. So every
I can't think of a
conference,
specific example, but go
oh,
ahead.
I know exactly what my example is. Every conference I go to, there's some crypto bro who shows up who's going to revolutionize democracy through the
Mm-hmm.
blockchain. And they just find you and start telling you everything about NFTs and crypto and blockchain. You're like, your eyes are just fucking glazing over, and they won't. Every conference,
Oh my
universally
God,
across the board. Yeah, that's my hell. So please, anybody, just
crypto bros.
never talk to me about crypto. I don't care. Like I aged out of it. I think I actually hit that age where
Yeah,
it's like I don't need to learn anything more. Like
all set.
I don't need Web 3.0. Like Web 2 is good.
No,
I got it.
I'm
I'm
fine.
golden on that side. So
Yeah.
anyways, Joseph probably sat there just kind of nodding along to how cool Roy's story was, and then immediately went to the police.
Good on him.
He's the reason all this happened. Like
That's
he's the
good.
reason why like the downfall happened because the police had no they these were all missing people for the most part, except for
Mm-hmm.
the last one, Shirley. And stupidly enough, Roy gave such detail that police were able to triangulate him just from what Joseph reiterated from the stories that he told. For example, he mentioned that one time they had maced a woman while trying to get her into their minivan. And then Joseph recounted that exact story verbatim, and the police looked up there was a report saying, yeah, this woman showed up saying there was a silver minivan, there's two guys in it, and they maced me and tried to drag me into it.
Did Joseph get some sort of Presidential Medal of Honor?
I don't know. I hope
Is
he
he
was at
still
least
alive?
pardoned for
Can we
whatever. We
give
don't.
him something?
Yeah. Unfortunately, Joseph Jackson's not an easy name to Google.
True.
Yeah.
But
So
man, good for him.
good for him.
That's great.
Yeah, like Roy gave him all the details that he needed to incriminate himself. That story, the one of the maced woman, her name is Robin Robeck, and she reported all this, like I said, to the police, but she just couldn't identify the people at the time, so the case kind of just went away. After
Mm-hmm.
Joseph described what happened, the missing girls, the abductions, the police went back to Robin with photos of Roy and Lawrence, and she immediately identified them. Like it wasn't like just those two. Obviously, it was like a photo lineup of like a dozen, but she immediately picked out those two.
Wow.
Police are actually doing really good work here. So they're starting to survey Roy, and they saw him dealing marijuana, which was a parole violation for him that he was picked up on. Lawrence was also picked up, but it was more blunt. It was for the assault on Robin.
Mm-hmm.
Police searched Lawrence's apartment and Roy's bedroom in his mom's house, and they find basically what you would expect: just tons of photos of victims, of potential victims, of random girls walking down the beach, jewelry of the victims. They also found that audio recording I mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
They said they also found acidic material, which apparently Lawrence intended on using on the next victim. So thank God that stopped.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Roy was having a pretty hard time with this. He was having a hard time with being arrested. he actually waived his Miranda rights just to show how intelligent he is. And then he ultimately confessed to police. His argument being mostly like, hey, it wasn't me, it was Lawrence all along. The
Just like
the prisoner's dilemma story basically
yeah.
just rehashed in this situation, which again, like I said, I always kind of couch Lawrence as the antagonist, but like he's not like Roy's not like some innocent bystander to any of this stuff.
No, I mean he was there and he didn't tell anyone
Exactly.
like the other guy did.
Exactly. And Roy was ultimately given a $10,000 bail, whereas Lawrence was outright denied bail, which I don't even understand why Roy was given that option. Seems incredibly generous.
Yeah,
Although, I mean, again, going for conversion rates, it might have been unattainable amounts of money for him, anyways.
that's true.
Roy would eventually testify against Lawrence in return for the prosecution not seeking the death penalty, obviously. Roy ends up getting 45 years to life, and then he became eligible for parole in 2010. But he actually, this is later on in his prison life, he didn't actually go to his parole hearing, which deferred it out another 10 years. By the time the
Hmm.
next 10 years came, he was dead, so it didn't really matter. Not that he would have gotten released anyways.
Right.
Lawrence is incredible. He just keeps on criming. So he hired 2 inmates while he was in jail who to go kill Robin because they were about to get released soon to prevent her from testifying. So,
That isn't that just what Alec Murdoch did too? Or tried to kill someone from jail?
oh man,
It wasn't that part of his story that he tried to hire a hitman to kill someone?
I'm trying to remember.
That was-
No, it was somebody else who tried to hire someone while in jail to kill the prosecution. It was one of the idiots that I covered. It wasn't the Daybell guy. What was the other? Oh, it was Scott Drew Peterson.
Was it? Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Gosh, that's so ridiculous. That is not
Yeah,
going to work.
it never works.
For our listeners who are incarcerated, there is
You are constantly
there
surveilled.
are no hitmen. There are
There's
none.
no hitmen. So obviously he got caught for that. He ended up going to trial for the murders in 1981, having sort of pled guilty. He didn't reply when the judge asked him if he pleads guilty or not. So in that situation, it's just deferred that you're pleading not guilty, and so that's what the judge entered. His defense obviously tried to exclude the audio recording of Shirley's death. And the judge actually told the jury, because they would play this tape in court, they told the jury, for those of you who do not know what hell is like, you will find out. Like, that is the
Ugh.
level of insanity that we're talking about. Apparently, when the tape was played, the entire courtroom and observers in the courtroom were reduced to tears, except for Lawrence. And again, I mentioned the impact this tape has had on people. As an aside, one of the main investigators in the crime committed suicide after this trial.
Oh my
And
God.
he wrote a 10-page suicide note that specifically referenced the tape and the murders as haunting him.
Oh no. How many
Yeah,
murders? How many people did they kill?
it
How
would
many
have
men?
been 5.
Ugh. Okay.
Well, it's 5 that we know of because they confessed to it. There's
Hmm.
there's another one where the girl is at the dump site in the San Gabriel Mountains with pictures of her there, and they didn't confess to that one. So like we don't know what happened to this one. She's still missing.
Got it.
Lawrence interestingly took the stand in his own defense, but it seems like that was mostly for his own entertainment value rather than any realistic hope of talking his way out of this. He was obviously found guilty and obviously sentenced to death. Lawrence is just like, when you talk, he's just a piece of work. He continued being a pain in the ass from prison. He was actually declared what's called a vexatious litigant at one point, which I love. Like, that is someone who just will not stop filing frivolous lawsuits for no
Hmm.
reason. So like there was one story about how he filed a frivolous lawsuit because he was served like a broken cookie and he called that cruel and unusual punishment. Like he was just a
Oh, an asshole. Yeah.
pain in the ass.
Yeah.
So like once you're labeled a vexatious litigant, you have to get permission from a judge or a lawyer to actually submit any more litigation. So like
Yeah.
that's like his right to file complaints was basically taken away from him
Because he was so annoying.
because he was so annoying. Like I said, like he ended up dying in 2019. He was 79 years old, which is like a pretty ripe old age. And he was still on
Hmm.
death row at the time. Roy
Wow.
also died shortly thereafter. He died in 2020. He was 70. He would have been 71 or 72 at this point because they have a 7-8 year age gap. And that's kind of it. Like these were two guys who came together, who the universe put together, who in my mind, I think that Lawrence would have just been a normal dude, probably. Like
Yeah.
his crimes weren't that bad until they met. Like he was just, and he had a
Really-
great job. Like he was doing normal shit, but I don't know. Roy kind of
Yeah.
brought the worst out. But also, the reason I placed him as the antagonist is because Roy kind of planted the seeds, and then Lawrence had the intellect to
Uh-huh.
completely run with it. If it wasn't for Lawrence, Roy would have just been like running, just finding women and hitting them over the head with a baseball bat. Like you know, like
Right.
there'd be no like system if it wasn't for Lawrence's abilities. But
Right. So like separately, they might have done other things, but together that was really the thing.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. It's awful. It's all around
It's
awful.
awful.
Hate the story. I think like again, this is one of those ones that you just don't hear about very often because it's just so bad. And I've literally skipped over like 95% of the details of what happened to these
Yeah.
people.
Oh my
And
God.
there's a reason for it. If you want to read more, but it's not gonna make you feel good.
No, it's gonna make you feel terrible. Oh my God.
Yeah,
Those poor babies.
I
Oh, I
know.
see a picture of the van. Not great. It looks like exactly what you think it would look like.
Yeah, yeah,
Ugh. Yuck. It sounds like also some of the pictures I'm looking at are from like movies about it, from like the 70s and 80s, I guess. It does look very Saw, you know.
yeah. It the stories of what they would do when they got up to the San Gabriel Mountains.
Hmm.
Because I've been up there. I mean, you've been up there, right? Like
I think so.
it's yeah, it's not that far from LA. It's desolate. It is desolate.
Hmm.
There's like hundreds of little offshoot roads that you could go
Hmm.
down that would take you places where nobody's ever gonna find you.
Yeah.
And it's just you with these two lunatics in a van that had its entire back stripped out. There's a bed put in there, and it's turned into like a workshop. Like it's just
Yeah.
it is Saw. Like it is as
Yeah.
close to that universe as you can get. And some of the shit they did was just like yeah.
Do you think they used their tools for like other things?
Yes, I know they did.
Like fixing things?
No, I meant other things like like torturing people.
No, no, I mean, but like also they're like, oh, I need a screwdriver. And then like would like use it even though they had just like murdered someone with it.
They just take the pieces of hair and like blood that's on it off and
Exactly.
then start
And
using
then like
yeah.
fix a chair.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, they seem handy enough to build this mobile kill van.
Ugh. Well, that's
But
terrible.
you know, going back to like the entire premise of like what goes on, I think they tell you this if you do rehab that like you're not supposed to date somebody else in rehab, right?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah.
Because there's a underlying component in your brain that's gonna maybe go backwards with each other.
Yeah.
And this is a little bit of that too. Like if you make buddies with somebody while you're incarcerated, you maybe just like, you know what, like leave that relationship where it is while you're
Hmm.
in jail and then move on with your life and do something different. Like find other people, go to the coffee shop, go to the dog park and just like socialize with others. I think like
Yeah.
that's kind of the red flag here is like just there's no need to come back together. Like
Yeah. Just
that
like
part of
leave
your
that
life,
behind. Yeah.
yeah, that part of life happened. It must have been magical, but we can leave that in San Luis Obispo's prison when it does
Yeah.
happen.
I feel like that the moment when they're like, oh, you have all these terrible thoughts too. That was like the no turning back point. You know, they're like, oh, I found someone who's just like me in
Yeah, it reminded me of
a
Leonard Lake
way.
and Charles Ng. Like it's just like
Hmm.
just garbage wrapped in skin, just showing up. It's just they're such trash,
Hmm. Hmm.
and they bond over the things that nobody should bond over.
Yeah, totally. So my aunt, who will never listen to this, one time told my mom a story, and I don't have the details, but she said that in San Francisco in the 70s, one of her friends was a gay man, and he was killed by someone who came over and just shot him. And I think it was Charles Ng.
Yeah, I know that story. It was
Yeah,
he was a radio DJ or something, and he put an ad in the paper, and somebody just showed up and shot him and left, and
yeah.
that's
I think my
Ing
aunt knew
confessed to
him.
that.
Hmm. Hmm. That's terrible.
Wow, that's crazy.
I know. Wow. Well, that's awful.
Yeah. Do you have any ending banter that you want to go into?
Um, thank you to everyone who's listening, please give us reviews. That's super helpful. I made an email address. So I have doomtofailpod@gmail.com if anybody wants to email us about anything. And we're going to work on maybe a newsletter. Just getting it out to more people is going to be really the thing to keep this going. I think that's our next step.
Yeah, yeah. And thank you for taking point on that. Obviously, my last 2 weeks have been chaotic. 2 weeks ago, I had no electricity for a week, and then last week I was on the road. So, thanks for taking point on that stuff.
Yeah, totally. I'm glad you're back. And yeah, everybody watch Wild, the movie, and there's some Toolbox Killer movies. Maybe watch it, maybe don't.
I'm not watching it,
Yeah, I might not do it. I like the Saw movies, but I like them because they're like ridiculous.
and not 100% accurate in
Yeah,
real to
like they didn't
somebody's
really
life.
happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Um. Well, thank you, Taylor. Hopefully, you
sorry.
have a great weekend
Oh, you too.
and safe travels for work the next week or two. And
Thanks.
yeah, I guess I'll see you next week.
Cool.
Thanks all. Bye.
Bye.